The question was simple enough. Can I sit here? But when David looked up from his untouched lunch and saw the CEO standing at his table, he had no idea that saying yes would unravel a 17-year-old secret, connecting his dead wife to the woman now offering him half her sandwich. Was this meeting truly just a coincidence? Before we continue, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. David had worked at SparkNest Tech for 6 months as a data analyst, head down, voice quiet, existing in the margins where nobody asked questions. He preferred it that way. Questions led to conversations. Conversations led to connections. Connections led to people caring. And when people cared, they noticed things. Like why a single father sometimes wore the same shirt 3 days running, or why his lunch often consisted of whatever his daughter hadn't finished from her school meal the night before. Today's cafeteria was more crowded than usual. Some corporate event had drawn the executive floor down among the regular employees, a migration of designer labels into a sea of business casual. David had found a corner table near the windows, the kind of spot where fluorescent light didn't quite reach, where he could eat quickly and return to the safety of his cubicle. He'd just settled into his seat when he felt her presence before he heard her voice. "Can I sit here?" David looked up. The woman standing before him radiated the kind of presence that didn't ask permission. It simply was. Mid-40s. Sharp features softened by something genuine in her dark eyes. Hair pulled back in a style that suggested efficiency over vanity. "The cafeteria's packed," she continued, her tone matter-of-fact. "Every other table's full, and I'm not particularly fond of eating lunch in my office like some kind of hermit." She paused, studying him with an intensity that made him shift uncomfortably. "Besides, you look like someone who won't try to pitch me ideas while I'm trying to enjoy my sandwich." David glanced at his plate, then at the empty chairs around him. "Sure, it's a free country." She sat with fluid grace, placing her tray down with deliberate care. A simple turkey sandwich, apple slices, and black coffee. Not the catered executive meal David had imagined lived on the 14th floor. Silence stretched between them. But it wasn't uncomfortable. She ate slowly, methodically, occasionally glancing out the window at the city skyline beyond. David tried to focus on his own food, but his stomach churned with the morning's worry. "You're not eating," she observed without looking at him. "I'm eating," he replied, forcing a forkful of pasta into his mouth. "No," she said, turning to face him fully now. "You're moving food around your plate like a chess game you're losing." She took a sip of her coffee. "I'm Valentina Lewis, by the way. And before you get nervous, yes, I'm the CEO. And no, I'm not here to evaluate your lunch etiquette." David nearly choked. I didn't." "Relax," Valentina said, a hint of something warm beneath her professional veneer. "I asked to sit here because you were alone, and frankly, so was I." She broke off a piece of her sandwich. "But now I'm curious. A man who brings his lunch to work but doesn't eat it usually has something heavier on his mind than quarterly reports." David set down his fork. "Just a long morning." Valentina studied him with the same intensity she probably used in boardrooms, reading financial projections and human tells with equal precision. "I have a policy," she said finally. "If someone sits at my table, actually sits and shares the space, then they eat, really eat, not just survive." She pushed half her sandwich toward him. "Only if you eat too," she said, the words carrying weight beyond their simplicity. David stared at the offered food, something in his chest tightening. When was the last time someone had noticed? When had anyone looked at him and seen past the careful mask of fine, the armor of I'm managing? "My daughter," he heard himself say, the words escaping before he could stop them. "She's been sick. Not seriously, the doctors say. Just stress. But she's 9 years old. What does a 9-year-old have to be stressed about?" He laughed, but it came out hollow. Except everything, apparently. Valentina didn't offer platitudes. She simply listened, and in that listening, David felt something shift. But neither of them knew that this conversation was simply the first thread in a tapestry of connection that would force them both to confront the ghosts they'd been running from. Over the following weeks, something unexpected developed. Valentina made a habit of finding David in the cafeteria, always with that same direct question. Eating today, or just pretending? Their conversations remained surface level at first, weather and work, the safe topics that kept walls intact. But gradually, in the way water finds cracks in stone, deeper truths began to seep through. David learned that Valentina lived alone in a penthouse that felt more like a museum than a home. That she worked 16-hour days not because the company demanded it, but because silence demanded more. That she'd built an empire, but forgotten to build a life. Valentina learned that David had been a promising architect once, designing spaces that made people feel safe, whole. That he'd walked away from everything after his wife died, trading drafting tables for databases, creativity for survival. That his daughter Lila was brilliant and fragile, carrying grief like a winter coat she couldn't remove even in summer. "She doesn't eat breakfast anymore," David admitted one afternoon, his voice barely audible above the cafeteria noise. "Says her stomach hurts, but I know it's more than that. The school counselor called last week. Lila's withdrawing, not participating, just disappearing." Valentina's coffee cup stilled halfway to her lips. "Disappearing," she repeated, something flickering across her face too quick to name. "That's a survival skill, you know. Making yourself small enough that the pain can't find you." The way she said it, David knew she wasn't just talking about Lila. "I don't know how to reach her," David continued, his hands clenching around his napkin. "Every time I try to talk about her mother, she changes the subject. Every time I suggest therapy, she shuts down. I'm watching my daughter fade, and I don't know how to pull her back." Valentina was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of old wounds. "When I was 12, I stopped eating. Not dramatically, just gradually. My mother was dying, cancer, and everyone kept saying she'd fight through it. Be strong, stay positive. But I saw the truth in her eyes. She was already gone, just waiting for her body to catch up." She looked at David directly now. "No one asked why I was disappearing. They just kept insisting I eat. Be strong. Stay positive." The same useless words they'd given my mother. Her fingers traced the rim of her cup. "It took me 25 years to understand that I wasn't trying to disappear. I was trying to control the one thing I could when everything else was chaos." David felt something click into place. "You think that's what Lila's doing? Trying to control something?" "I think," Valentina said carefully, "that grief in children looks like a lot of things. Stomach aches, silence, withdrawal, because they don't have the words yet for the hole in their chest." She paused. "And I think you might be so focused on saving her from pain that you've forgotten she needs to see it's okay to feel it." The words landed like stones in still water, ripples spreading outward. "I'm scared," David whispered, the admission raw. "What if I do this wrong? What if I make it worse?" Valentina reached across the table, her hand hovering just above his. She didn't touch him, but the gesture held weight nonetheless. "You can't do it wrong when you're doing it with love," she said, "but you also can't do it alone." Neither of them realized that Valentina's words were more than advice. They were confession. And the truth behind her expertise would soon surface in ways that would shatter everything David thought he knew. The lunch meetings evolved into something more deliberate. Valentina began bringing articles about childhood grief, resources for single parents, names of therapists who specialized in trauma. David reciprocated by actually eating, by letting someone witness his struggle without judgment. One Thursday, Valentina didn't appear at their usual time. David found himself disappointed, surprised by how much he'd come to rely on those conversations, that steady presence that demanded nothing but offered everything. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Conference room 14B. Come now. VL David's heart raced as he navigated the elevator to the 14th floor, a territory he'd never entered. Executive country. The conference room door was slightly ajar. Inside, Valentina stood by the windows, her silhouette sharp against the afternoon light. "I overstepped," she said without preamble. "I made some calls. A friend of mine, Dr. Allison, she specializes in pediatric grief counseling. She had a cancellation tomorrow at 4. Valentina turned, her expression uncharacteristically uncertain. "I took the liberty of booking it under your name, if you want it." David should have felt imposed upon. Instead, he felt seen. "Why are you doing this?" Valentina's mask slipped, just for a moment. "Because 17 years ago someone should have done it for me." The air between them shifted, charged with unspoken understanding. "There's something else," Valentina continued, her voice quieter now. "This Saturday. There's a grief support picnic in Riverside Park, for families, kids, parents. It's informal, no pressure, just people who understand." She met his eyes. "I volunteer there, have for the past decade. I'd like you and Lila to come." David processed this new information. The CEO of SparkNest Tech spent her Saturdays with grieving families. "I don't understand," he said. "Why would you—" "Because I know what it's like," Valentina interrupted, her composure cracking slightly. "To watch someone you love disappear, to feel helpless, to carry guilt that isn't yours, but feels like it anyway." She moved to the conference table, pulled out a chair with deliberate care. "When I was 12, my mother died. When I was 14, my younger brother stopped talking. Just completely shut down. My father buried himself in work. I was left to figure out how to save someone when I was still drowning myself." David sat slowly. "What happened?" "I failed," Valentina said simply. "Or I thought I did. Matthew, my brother, he struggled for years. Depression, anxiety, self-harm. By the time he was 17, I'd become CEO of my first startup, throwing myself into success because it was easier than facing the wreckage at home." She paused, her voice rough. "He attempted suicide my senior year of college. Overdose. They found him in time, but barely. The confession was heavy and sacred. "I'm sorry," David managed. "Don't be," Valentina replied. "He's alive. Thriving, actually. Married, 2 kids. Runs a nonprofit for at-risk youth. But it took him almost dying for me to understand what I'd been doing wrong." She looked at David with fierce intensity. "I'd been trying to fix him instead of being with him, trying to solve his pain instead of witnessing it." David felt tears threatening. "Is that what I'm doing with Lila?" "I don't know," Valentina said honestly. "But I know that you showing up, asking questions, accepting help, that's not fixing. That's love. And sometimes love looks like admitting we can't do it alone." That Saturday, David and Lila stood at the edge of Riverside Park, watching families spread blankets and children chase frisbees with the kind of ease that came from shared understanding. Lila's hand gripped David's tightly, her small body tense. Valentina approached them with a gentle smile, wearing jeans and a simple blue sweater, looking more human than David had ever seen her. "You came," she said warmly. "Lila, I'm Valentina. I'm a friend of your dad's." Lila studied her with solemn eyes. "You're pretty." Valentina laughed, surprised. "Thank you. You're perceptive." She knelt to Lila's level. "There's a craft table over there where kids are making memory boxes. Decorated boxes where you can put special things that remind you of people you love. Would you like to try?" Lila looked at David, uncertain. He nodded encouragement. Slowly, she released his hand and walked toward the craft table, glancing back every few steps. "She's scared," David said quietly. "She's brave," Valentina corrected. "Fear and bravery aren't opposites. They're partners." As the afternoon unfolded, David watched his daughter slowly, tentatively engage with other children who understood loss. He watched Valentina move through the crowd with practiced ease, offering tissues and wisdom with equal measure. And he felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years: hope. But buried beneath Valentina's compassion and expertise lay a truth she hadn't yet revealed, one that would connect their stories in ways neither could have imagined. 3 months passed. Lila started therapy, started eating breakfast again, started smiling in ways that reached her eyes. David found himself looking forward to work, not just for the paycheck, but for the daily anchor of Valentina's presence. Those lunch conversations that had become his lifeline. They'd grown closer, carefully, like two people who'd learned to fear connection, learning to trust again. Nothing romantic, nothing defined, just a steady current of understanding that ran deeper than words. One evening, David picked Lila up from an after-school art program Valentina had recommended. His daughter clutched a poster board, excitement bright in her face. "Dad, look what we made. Family trees, but with pictures and stories." David studied the collage. Photos of Lila as a baby, her mother's radiant smile, David young and hopeful. And in the corner, a new addition, a printed photo from the grief picnic. Lila and Valentina laughing over a painted memory box. "Mrs. Valentina says families aren't just blood," Lila explained. "They're people who show up." David's throat tightened. She's right. That night, after Lila fell asleep, David sat in his small apartment living room, staring at the family tree. Something nagged at him, a detail just out of focus. He pulled out his phone, zoomed in on the grief picnic photo. Valentina's sweater. Blue. Simple, but visible on the collar was a small enamel pin. He enlarged the image further. The pin showed a semicolon with wings, a symbol he recognized from grief support groups. "Continue your story. Choose to stay." Beneath it, barely visible, another pin. This one showed a date, June 14th, 2007. David's blood went cold. June 14th, 2007. The date felt significant, though he couldn't place why. He opened his laptop, began searching. Semicolon pin significance led him down a rabbit hole of suicide prevention awareness. June 14th, 2007, plus tragedy, yielded local news articles. And then he found it. Local family tragedy. Woman dies after long battle with cancer. Daughter attempts rescue. The article was brief, clinical. Catherine Lewis, 42, had died of pancreatic cancer. Her daughter, Valentina Lewis, 12, had been found attempting CPR when paramedics arrived. The family requested privacy. There was a photo, old and grainy. A young Valentina, haunted eyes too old for her face, standing between her father and a teenage boy who must have been Matthew. But it was the follow-up article from 3 years later that shattered David's world. Automotive accident claims, life of local architect, widow and child. Left behind, there was a photo. David's late wife, Jennifer, young and vibrant, standing beside another woman at some charity event. The caption read, "Jennifer Brown, left, and Catherine Lewis, right, at the annual Hope Foundation Gala, 6 months before Lewis's passing." David couldn't breathe. His wife and Valentina's mother had known each other, had worked together, had been friends. But there was more. Another article, deeper in the archives. Architectural firm donates design services to grief charity in memory of founder's late wife. The architectural firm, Lewis and Associates, founded by Valentina's father. The grief charity, the Catherine Lewis Foundation. The same foundation that ran the Riverside Park grief picnics, the same foundation where Valentina volunteered. David's mind raced, connecting threads he'd never seen. The way Valentina had looked at him that first day in the cafeteria, like she'd recognized something. Her intimate knowledge of childhood grief. Her immediate, intense investment in helping Lila. This wasn't random. This wasn't chance. His phone rang. Valentina's name on the screen. His hand shook as he answered. "David," her voice was tight, strained. "I need to see you. Tonight. There's something I should have told you months ago." They met at the closed cafeteria, the space eerie and hollow without its daytime chaos. Valentina stood by their usual table, her composure fractured in ways David had never witnessed. "You know," she said simply. "You found out." David's anger surprised him with its intensity. "You knew who I was, from the beginning. You knew my wife, knew my story, and you what? Decided to play guardian angel without telling me?" "Yes," Valentina said, her voice breaking. "Yes, I knew. I knew because your wife Jennifer saved my life." "What are you talking about?" David demanded. Valentina sank into a chair, years of carefully maintained control dissolving. "After my mother died, I couldn't cope. I was 12, angry, drowning. My father shut down. Matthew stopped talking. I felt responsible for everyone and capable of helping no one." She looked up at David with devastated eyes. "I tried to kill myself. Pills from my mother's hospice care that should have been disposed of." David felt the ground shift beneath him. "Your wife found me," Valentina continued, her voice raw. "She was doing grief counseling work through my mother's foundation. She'd started checking on families after primary loss. She showed up unannounced that day. Something told her to visit." Valentina's hands trembled. "She found me unconscious, called 911, stayed with me through the hospital, through the psychiatric evaluation, through the worst of it." Tears streamed down Valentina's face now, unchecked. "She saved my life, David. Literally. And then she kept showing up. Every week for 2 years. She taught me that surviving wasn't weakness, that asking for help was strength, that grief didn't have to be the end of the story." David couldn't speak, couldn't process. His wife, his Jennifer, had saved Valentina. And then 3 years later, Jennifer had died in a car accident, leaving David and infant Lila to navigate their own grief. "When I saw you in that cafeteria," Valentina said, "I recognized your name from Jennifer's stories. She used to talk about her husband, the architect, who built spaces that made people feel safe, about her daughter, who'd just been born, who she hoped would grow up brave and kind." Valentina's voice cracked completely. "I'd been looking for you for years, trying to find a way to repay the debt, to honor what Jennifer gave me. But you'd changed firms, changed cities, disappeared. So you manipulated me," David said, anger and grief warring in his chest. "You saw me struggling and decided to play savior without giving me the truth." "Yes," Valentina admitted, "and I was wrong. I told myself I was helping, but really I was trying to absolve my guilt, trying to save you and Lila the way Jennifer saved me." She stood, facing him fully. "But here's the truth I didn't expect. You didn't need saving. You needed support. You needed someone to walk beside you, not lead you. And somewhere in these months, it stopped being about debt and became about connection." David pressed his palms against his eyes, overwhelmed. "I don't know what to feel right now." "Feel angry," Valentina said. "Feel betrayed. Feel whatever's true. I can handle it. But please, please don't let my mistakes hurt Lila. She's thriving. David, she's healing. Whatever happens between us, let her keep that." David looked at this woman who'd become his anchor, his friend, his lifeline. This woman who'd known his greatest loss intimately, because she'd been saved by it. "Did you love her?" he asked quietly. "My wife." "Did you love her?" "Like a second mother," Valentina whispered. "Like the person who taught me my life had value." "Yes, I loved her." The anger drained from David, leaving only exhaustion and something he couldn't name. "I need time," he said finally. "I need to process this." Valentina nodded, tears still falling. "Take all the time you need. But know this. Everything I felt, every conversation, every moment of caring about you and Lila, that was real. The foundation was a lie. The relationship wasn't. But David couldn't yet see that this revelation wasn't an ending. It was an invitation to transform grief into something neither of them had imagined possible. The Catherine Lewis Foundation's new wing opened on a bright April morning, its glass walls reflecting sky and possibility. The building's architect, David Brown, stood beside the CEO, Valentina Lewis, as they cut the ribbon. It had taken months of painful honesty, therapy sessions both individual and shared, and countless difficult conversations. But slowly, David had come to understand what Valentina had tried to explain that night. Debt and love weren't mutually exclusive. Jennifer's gift to Valentina had rippled outward, creating circles of healing that now included him and Lila. They'd established boundaries, rebuilt trust on foundation of truth. Valentina stepped back from direct involvement with Lila's care, but remained a steady presence in both their lives, not as savior, not as guardian angel, but as family of the kind Lila had described. People who show up. "Your mom would be proud," Valentina said quietly, as they watched families stream into the new building, a space David had designed with every lesson Jennifer had taught him about safety, warmth, and hope. "She'd be proud of you too," David replied. "You turned what she gave you into something bigger." Lila ran up, now 10 years old, bright and open in ways that seemed impossible a year ago. "Dad, Mrs. Valentina, they want us inside for the speech." As they walked into the building together, David's hand found Valentina's, squeezed once. Not romantic, not yet, maybe never, but connected. Two people who'd found each other through tragedy and chosen to build something beautiful from the wreckage. Inside, David took the microphone. "This building," he began, "is named for Catherine Lewis, who understood that grief doesn't have to be the end of the story. And it's dedicated to Jennifer, who proved that one person showing up can save a life." He looked at Valentina, at Lila, at the families gathered. But more than that, it's a reminder that we're all walking each other home, that asking for help isn't weakness, that sharing a table, a meal, a moment of truth, that's how we survive. He paused, his voice strengthening. "Someone once asked if they could sit at my table. I said yes, not knowing that simple act would change everything, would reveal that our stories were already connected, woven together by love and loss and the choice to keep going." He met Valentina's eyes. "So today, I'm asking all of you, pull up a chair, sit down, share your story, and don't just survive." Valentina stepped forward, completing his thought. "Eat too. Really eat. Really live. Really heal." The applause was thunderous, but David barely heard it. He was watching Lila, who stood between him and Valentina, holding both their hands, smiling with a peace that had taken years to build, and seconds to nearly destroy, and months to rebuild stronger. That evening, the three of them sat in the empty cafeteria of Spark Nest Tech, eating sandwiches Valentina had made, a deliberate recreation of that first lunch. "Dad," Lila said, picking at her food, "Mrs. Valentina told me about Mom, about how they knew each other." David glanced at Valentina, who nodded permission. "What did she tell you?" "That Mom saved her life, That when people are hurting, showing up matters more than being perfect. Lila looked between them. And that family isn't just who we lose, it's who we find. David felt tears threaten. That sounds like something your mother would say. It sounds, Lila said, with the wisdom of someone who'd learned grief young, like something we all need to remember. As they ate together, talking and laughing and simply being, David understood what Valentina had been trying to teach him all along. Jennifer's love hadn't ended with her death. It had transformed, rippling outward through Valentina's survival, through David's healing, through Lila's strength. It lived in every family who walked through the foundation doors, every child who learned grief wasn't the end, every person who chose to keep going. "Thank you," David said softly to Valentina, "for the manipulation and the truth, for the lies and the love, for all of it." Valentina smiled, genuine and warm. "Thank you for saying yes when I asked to sit down, for eating when I pushed you, for forgiving when I didn't deserve it." Lila interrupted with a grin. "Are you guys done being mushy? Because I'm still hungry, and Mrs. Valentina promised dessert." They laughed, the sound echoing off the empty cafeteria walls, and in that laughter lived everything they'd survived and everything they'd become. 3 people who'd found each other in grief and chosen to build a family from forgiveness, truth, and the simple act of showing up. The question wasn't whether they'd heal completely. Grief didn't work that way. The question was whether they'd keep choosing each other, keep pulling up chairs, keep eating together in every sense of the word. And the answer, written in every shared meal and honest conversation and moment of hard-won peace, was yes. Always yes. If this story touched something in you, hit that like button and share it with someone you want to hear with. Subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss another story.